Raising a fatherless boy on pennies just breeds a pathetic loser. Those venomous words left my sister's glossed lips with a casual, practiced ease. She spoke them softly, letting them float across the long mahogany table, cutting through the heavy silence of the dining room like a serrated hunting knife. She did not yell. She did not scream. She just smirked, wearing a terrible, twisting expression of profound superiority, and delivered a sentence meticulously designed to shatter a grieving child's soul. I sat frozen in my oversized, uncomfortable chair. Across from me, my 10-year-old son, Penn, stopped breathing. I watched the exact millisecond his fragile heart cracked open all over again. His small hands, which had been nervously twisting a white linen napkin into tight knots under the table, went entirely rigid. His bottom lip trembled, and his dark eyes that looked exactly like his late father's, filled with a hot, humiliated sheen of tears. He pushed his china plate away. The heavy silver fork clattered loudly against the porcelain, echoing in the quiet room. He shrank down into his seat, his shoulders hunching forward as he tried desperately to fold himself into nothingness. A visceral, ancient rage ignited in the center of my chest. It was a blazing, white-hot fury that threatened to consume all the oxygen in my lungs. For 4 grueling years, I had swallowed their endless insults. I had endured their passive-aggressive pity, their sneers about my clothes, and their relentless judgment about my supposed poverty. I had played the role of the tragic, helpless widow to perfection. I sacrificed my own dignity daily just to keep a fragile illusion of peace for my son. I wanted him to have a family. I wanted him to know his grandparents. I wanted him to feel tethered to a world that had so ruthlessly ripped his father away from him. But looking at Penn's devastated face, I realized that peace was far too expensive. My sister had finally crossed the one boundary I had sworn to protect with my very life. She had targeted the innocent boy who still cried for his father in the dark of the night. The sheer audacity of her cruelty left me breathless, but beneath the initial shock, a cold, calculating monster was slowly waking up inside me. I did not cry. I did not scream. Instead, a terrifying clarity washed over my mind. They thought they were untouchable in their castle of lies. They had no idea who was actually sitting at their table. I reached for the heavy manila folder hidden in my leather bag, knowing that once I opened it, this family would burn to the ground. How did we reach this catastrophic point of no return? And what kind of devastating secrets was I about to unleash upon them? To understand the explosion, you have to witness the suffocating pressure cooker that built it. The sound of heavy silver hitting fine china used to mean comfort to me when I was a little girl. It meant a good meal was ending and something sweet was coming. But in my parents' sprawling suburban home, that specific clinking sound meant the firing squad was loading their weapons for the evening. The air in the formal dining room was thick. It was suffocating with the heavy smell of roasted lamb, rich garlic gravy, and the earthy red wine my father, Alaric, poured far too generously into every glass except mine. My name is Veda. I am 34 years old. 4 years ago, a drunk driver crossed a double yellow center line on a rain-slicked highway and ended my husband's life in a fraction of a second. From that exact Tuesday morning onward, I had been the designated scapegoat of this toxic lineage. I stopped being Veda, the ambitious woman, and became poor Veda, the family charity case. Penn sat quietly beside me. He was always quiet in this house. At 10 years old, he already knew the unwritten survival rules of our family better than anyone. Stay small. Say little. Try your hardest not to be a moving target in a room full of people holding emotional arrows. Every time we pulled into their long, paved driveway, I could feel the anxiety rolling off him in waves. But on this particular Sunday evening, staying small was simply not enough to save him from the crosshairs. The front door chimed deeply, and a gust of cold autumn air announced the arrival of the final guests. Aunt Maura breezed into the grand foyer, smelling overwhelmingly of cheap floral perfume and expensive gin. She was my mother's younger sister and the ultimate flying monkey for the family's toxic dynamic. Her role was always to validate the cruelty, to act as the eager audience for my older sister's grand performances. She marched into the dining room, her chunky, fake diamond bracelets clinking loudly against her wrists as she waved to the room. She did not greet me with a hug. Instead, she stood over my chair, adjusting her designer reading glasses, and looked me up and down with blatant, theatrical pity. "Veda, sweetheart," Mora cooed, her voice dripping with fake sympathy that made my skin crawl. "You look so terribly exhausted. And that gray sweater, well, it certainly looks warm, at least. It is just so heartbreaking how you have let yourself go since the accident. You used to care so much about your presentation." She turned her gaze toward the other end of the long table, where my older sister, Callista, sat holding court. Callista was 37, the undisputed golden child of the family, and the self-proclaimed founder of an elite interior design firm. She wore a tailored, plunging designer dress. Her blonde hair was perfectly blown out, and she was dripping in heavy gold jewelry that caught the light of the crystal chandelier above us. "Look at our Callista," Mora sighed happily, finally taking her designated seat next to my mother. "She is practically glowing with success. The contrast between you two is just so stark. But we all have our heavy burdens to bear, do we not?" I absorbed the blow in silence. I did not defend my cashmere sweater, which was actually a very understated, expensive piece I had bought for myself during a business trip to Paris last winter. I just nodded, offering a tight, polite smile to the woman who thrived on my supposed misery. I absorbed the pity and the condescension because I constantly told myself that Penn needed his extended family. I thought I was protecting him by absorbing the poison so it would not reach him. But as the dinner progressed, I realized the poison was seeping deeply into the groundwater, and we were all drowning in it. Would I be able to keep my mouth shut for the rest of the night, or was this the evening my iron self-control would finally shatter into a million unfixable pieces? There is a very specific kind of cruelty that lives and breathes in families who care more about their public image than they do about actual love. It is not a loud cruelty. It is not a screaming match in the front yard where the neighbors can hear the ugly words. It is a polite, smiling cruelty. It is the kind of psychological violence that leaves no physical bruises on your skin, so when you finally try to show people where it hurts, they tell you that you are imagining things and being far too sensitive. Over the past 4 years, I had quietly collected these moments of polite cruelty. I kept them neatly organized and locked away in a mental museum of pain inside my head. I visited this dark museum whenever I needed to remind myself why I kept my true life a total secret from the people who shared my DNA. The first prominent exhibit in this museum was the terrible incident with the party dress. 2 years after my husband died, my parents hosted a massive anniversary gala at a local, highly exclusive country club. I had saved up my own money and purchased a beautiful, elegant navy blue gown. It was tasteful, tailored, and made me feel like a beautiful human being again instead of a walking tragedy in mourning clothes. But the night before the event, my mother, Odette, showed up unannounced at my small rented apartment carrying a plastic garment bag. Inside the bag was a hideous, outdated, ruffled brown dress that looked like it had been pulled from a thrift store bargain bin 10 years ago. "Veda," my mother had said, her tone leaving no room for negotiation or argument. "You must wear this tomorrow night. Callista is wearing a custom silver gown, and we cannot have you trying to compete with her. People know you are struggling financially. If you show up in a new, expensive-looking dress, they will think you are irresponsible with your meager insurance payout. We have a specific image to maintain in this town. Wear the brown dress or do not bother coming to the party at all." I had worn the ugly brown dress. I stood in the dark corner of the country club ballroom, looking like an impoverished charity case, while Callista paraded around the dance floor like royalty. My parents spent the entire evening whispering to their wealthy friends about how they were doing their absolute best to support their tragic, penniless younger daughter. They needed my forced poverty to highlight their own manufactured generosity. They fed off my humiliation to build their own social status. The second major exhibit in my Museum of Pain was far more malicious, and it involved my career. It happened just last year. After months of grueling, manic work, I had secured a final interview for a massive promotion at my financial firm. I desperately needed a distraction from the crushing grief, so I threw myself into my work. I had purchased a single, flawless charcoal gray suit for the occasion. I hung it carefully on the back of the guest room door during a mandatory weekend visit to my parents' house, hoping to keep it pristine for Monday morning. Callista had walked into the guest room holding a full glass of dark red wine. She looked at the suit, looked at me, and then pretended to trip over a flat rug. The dark crimson liquid splashed directly across the front of the tailored jacket, soaking into the fabric and ruining it instantly. "Oh no," Callista had gasped, though her eyes were gleaming with unfiltered malice. "I am so terribly clumsy today. But honestly, Veda, it is probably for the best. You're aiming far too high. A massive corporate firm is not going to hire a depressed single mother for an executive role. You should stick to retail banking. It is much less stressful for someone in your precarious mental state. You do not want to suffer a breakdown in front of important men." She had intentionally destroyed my armor because the mere thought of me succeeding threatened her fragile, massive ego. She needed me to remain the broken, destitute widow so she could remain the shining star of the family. What they did not know, what they fundamentally failed to understand, was the reality of my life outside their twisted suburban bubble. I did not get the job in that ruined charcoal suit. I wore a cheap backup skirt and got an even better position. I threw myself into my career with a ruthless, singular focus. I am exceptionally, terrifyingly good with numbers. I see patterns in debt where others see only chaos. While my family firmly believed I was a low-level desk clerk struggling to make rent every month, I was actually quietly building a massive empire in the shadows. I was the vice president of corporate insolvency and restructuring for a massive national bank. I managed distressed debt portfolios worth hundreds of millions of dollars. I held real, tangible corporate power. When businesses failed, my department decided if they lived or died. I drove a reliable, beat-up older Honda not because I was broke, but because I did not care about shiny metal to prove my worth. I cared about ironclad financial security. I funneled hundreds of thousands of dollars into high-yield investment funds and unshakable trusts for Penn. I was wealthier than my parents and my sister combined, but I hid it all behind modest sweaters and a quiet, submissive demeanor. I knew with every fiber of my being that if they ever discovered my true wealth, they would either try to steal it or destroy it out of pure, venomous envy. I sat at the dining table, chewing a piece of dry roasted lamb, staring at my sister's smug face. She was currently wearing a heavy diamond necklace that I knew for a fact was bought on a high-interest credit card she could not afford to pay off. The irony tasted sharp and metallic on my tongue. I was the dragon hoarding gold in the cave, while they were the peasants boasting about tin coins. But the dragon was getting incredibly tired of being poked with sticks. How much longer could I sit here and listen to their delusions of grandeur before the beast finally unleashed its fire? The conversation around the long mahogany table naturally shifted to the only topic my family ever truly cared about. They did not discuss art or books or the state of the world. They only discussed themselves and their fabricated wealth. Sitting next to Aunt Maura was her new boyfriend, Cashin. He was a sharp, observant man in his late 40s. He was a corporate tax attorney by trade, a man who spent his days dissecting lies, reading complicated ledgers, and finding hidden money. He dressed impeccably in a dark suit, spoke very little, and watched our twisted family dynamics with the intense, unblinking focus of a hawk studying a nest of vipers. He had not said a single word to me since arriving, but I caught him glancing in my direction whenever Callista or my mother threw a veiled insult my way. His eyes held a quiet, analytical intelligence. I could tell he was silently adding up the emotional debts in the room. Callista's husband, Theron, leaned heavily back in his reinforced dining chair, swirling his expensive red wine until it coated the sides of the crystal glass. Theron was a commercial real estate broker, or at least, that was what he printed in bold gold lettering on his glossy business cards. In reality, he was a loud, obnoxious man who spent most of his time gambling on volatile cryptocurrency markets and bragging about phantom deals that never actually closed. "The market is just exploding right now," Theron boomed, using his aggressive, hearty salesman voice that, echoed painfully off the dining room walls. I am currently negotiating a massive commercial park downtown. Multi-million-dollar anchor tenants are lining up to speak with me. It is exhausting, honestly, moving that much capital around on a daily basis. But that is the heavy burden of being at the top of the food chain, right, Alaric? My father, sitting at the head of the table, nodded approvingly, puffing his chest out in a show of patriarchal pride. Hard work always pays off, Theron. You and Callista know how to hustle. You understand the true value of an aggressive portfolio. It is refreshing to see young people who are not afraid to conquer the world and build an empire. Theron smirked, taking a long, arrogant sip of his wine. He shifted his heavy frame in his seat and looked across the wide table, his gaze landing squarely on my 10-year-old son. Penn was meticulously cutting a roasted potato into tiny, symmetrical squares, trying his hardest to remain invisible while the adults talked about millions of dollars. A cruel, mocking light sparked in Theron's eyes. He reached his large hand into the pocket of his tailored slacks and pulled out a crumpled, dirty $5 bill. He leaned forward, stretching his arm across the table, and tossed the money casually toward us. It landed right next to Penn's pristine white china plate like a filthy, degrading stain. "Here you go, kid," Theron laughed, a harsh, barking sound that grated against my eardrums. "Go buy yourself some cheap candy at the gas station later. I know your mom is pretty strapped for cash these days. Got to look out for the less fortunate in the family, right? Consider it a charitable donation to the Veda Relief Fund." My father chuckled right along with him, a deep, rumbling sound of approval that made my stomach turn. Aunt Maura offered a patronizing, tight-lipped smile, adjusting her glasses. "Thank you, Theron. You are always so wonderfully generous to the boy. It takes a village to raise a child, especially for a single mother who is struggling to keep her head above water." I looked at the crumpled $5 bill resting on the expensive white tablecloth. Penn did not touch it. He did not look up. He did not say thank you. His small shoulders hunched forward, his hands gripping the dark fabric of his pants so tightly his knuckles turned entirely white under the harsh chandelier light. He looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. The heat in my blood spiked to a dangerous, boiling temperature. My jaw clenched so hard my back teeth ached. I wanted to reach across the wide expanse of mahogany, grab Theron by his expensive, imported silk tie, and force that dirty money down his throat until he choked on his own arrogance. I wanted to scream until my vocal cords shredded that I bought Penn new video games every single month, that we took quiet, luxurious vacations to private cabins in the mountains, and that I was the only person sitting at this massive table who actually knew the real, terrifying value of $1 and how to weaponize it. I bit the inside of my cheek until I tasted the sharp, hot copper of my own blood. I swallowed the rage, pushing it down deep into the dark pit in my stomach. "Hold on," I told myself fiercely. "Just get through the dessert course. Just eat the pie, say your polite goodbyes, get in the car, and drive back to the sanctuary of your safe, quiet apartment." I took a slow, measured breath, placing my hand gently over Penn's trembling knee beneath the table. I squeezed reassuringly, silently telling him that he was safe, that I was there. I thought the worst of the evening was over. I thought Theron's pathetic display of financial dominance was the peak of their cruelty for the night. I was so incredibly wrong. The main event had not even begun, and the trap they had set for me was about to snap shut. What grand, devastating performance had my mother orchestrated to ensure I felt entirely worthless before the night was over? The heavy silver platters of half-eaten meat were cleared away by the hired catering staff. They were quickly replaced by delicate crystal plates holding perfect slices of rich, dark chocolate tart. I stared at my dessert, the appetite stripped from my body by the toxic atmosphere of the room. I just wanted to pay the check of my emotional debt and leave. My mother, Odette, cleared her throat loudly. She picked up her heavy silver spoon and tapped it sharply against her crystal water goblet. The sharp, ringing sound cut through the low chatter of the room, demanding absolute silence from everyone present. She stood up slowly, smoothing the front of her expensive silk dress, her face set in an expression of grand, somber importance. Your father and I have some very critical family business to discuss this evening, my mother announced. Her eyes swept across the long table, lingering on Cashin for a moment to ensure the new audience member was paying close attention to their immense wealth. We believe in total transparency in this house. We do not keep secrets from the people we love. My stomach gave a tiny, involuntary lurch. It was not because I cared about their money. I did not want a single, solitary dime from their accounts. I had built my own fortress. But I knew exactly how these financial theater performances went in my family. It was never about practical estate planning. It was always about establishing dominance. It was about publicly declaring a strict hierarchy of love, value, and worthiness to breathe the same air as them. My father leaned forward, resting his elbows on the table, assuming his stern, patriarchal posture. As you all know, we are getting older. We met with our estate lawyers on Friday afternoon to finalize the family trust and update our wills. We had to make some very hard, strictly logical choices regarding our legacy and what we leave behind when we are gone. Theron leaned back in his chair, swirling his wine with a smug, expectant grin on his face. Callista sat up perfectly straight, fixing her posture. She looked like a queen waiting for her heavy golden crown to be placed upon her head. We looked very closely at where our assets would do the most good, my father continued, his voice echoing with authority. We looked at who in this family actually knows how to handle wealth, how to multiply it in the real estate market, and how to protect it for future generations. Exactly, my mother chimed in, pointing a manicured finger toward my sister. And that is why we have decided to formally structure the inheritance to reflect reality. 85% of the entire estate, including this house, the investment portfolios, and all liquid assets, will go directly to Callista and Theron. They have proven they know how to thrive. A heavy, pregnant silence fell over the dining room. Callista tried her absolute best to look humble and surprised, but a massive, victorious smile broke through her terrible acting. She looked directly across the table at me, her eyes gleaming with malice. She was waiting eagerly for the reaction. She was waiting for the bitter tears of jealousy. She wanted me to beg. She wanted me to start a screaming argument about fairness so she could call me unstable, greedy, and ungrateful. And Veda, my mother said, her tone suddenly shifting to that awful, sugary, condescending pity she wore like a second skin. We are leaving you the remaining 15%. Now, please do not be upset or feel slighted. We talked about this at length with the professionals. You are struggling. You live in a tiny rented apartment. You work a stressful, low-paying little desk job. If we handed you a large sum of money, you simply would not know what to do with it. Aunt Mora nodded vigorously, her fake jewelry rattling against the table. Odette is exactly right, Veda. Wealth management is very complicated. You would probably just lose it or spend it trying to keep up with people who have more. Callista knows the right financial people. Your parents are doing this for your own good, sweetie. They are protecting you from your own incompetence. I did not blink. I did not frown. I reached out, picked up my water glass, and took a slow, perfectly measured sip. The ice clinked softly against the crystal. I placed the glass back exactly where it was on the tablecloth, aligning it perfectly with the edge of my knife. That makes perfect logical sense, Mom, I said. My voice was entirely flat, devoid of any anger, sadness, or emotion. Thank you for letting me know your plans. I appreciate the transparency. The profound disappointment on Callista's face was instantly palpable. It was a physical blow to her inflated ego. She had carefully set the stage for a massive family drama, an explosive argument where she would emerge as the logical victor, and I point-blank refused to play my assigned part. I genuinely did not care about the 85%. I had my own ironclad security. I just wanted to finish this awful, suffocating meal and leave with my son. But Callista simply could not stand it. She could not stand that I was not broken and weeping over the money. If I would not break over the inheritance, she urgently needed to find a sharper weapon. She needed to draw blood to feel victorious. And she knew exactly where my only vulnerable spot was hiding. What line was she willing to cross to destroy my calm facade? Callista shifted her weight in her seat, her posture growing rigid with dark frustration. She picked up her silver dessert fork and began pushing her chocolate tart around, a mocking mirror image of what Pen had been doing earlier. The emotional tension in the dining room grew thick, suffocating, almost difficult to pull into my lungs. She needed a reaction from me. She fed on my pain, and I was starving her. She looked across the wide table, intentionally bypassing me entirely, and locked her sharp, critical eyes directly on my 10-year-old son. Pen was completely oblivious to the financial conversation. He was just trying to quietly exist, his small hands resting neatly in his lap, waiting for permission to leave the table. "You know, Veda," Callista started, her voice dripping with that fake, syrupy concern she always utilized right before dropping a verbal bomb on someone she deemed inferior. "I have been meaning to talk to you about little Pen for a while now. I was reading this fascinating medical article the other day about child psychology and severe developmental delays." My resting heart rate spiked instantly. A cold sweat broke out across the back of my neck. "Leave him out of this," the internal voice screamed in my head. "Attack me. Attack my job. Attack my clothes. But please, God, just leave my innocent child alone." "He is just so terribly timid," she continued, leaning forward across the table, invading his visual space like a predator cornering a rabbit. "Look at him right now. He is afraid of his own shadow." My twin boys, Hayes and Kale, at his exact age, were already leading their sports teams to victory. They were loud. They were wildly confident. They owned every room they walked into. Pen just sits there looking at his lap like he is afraid to even breathe the air in this house. It is simply not healthy for a boy to act like a frightened little mouse. "He is perfectly healthy," I said, my voice dropping an octave, hardening into solid stone. "He is currently reading 3 grades above his age level. He is a thoughtful, quiet kid. There is nothing wrong with being quiet and observing the world. Not everyone needs to shout to be heard." Callista sighed, a long, theatrical, drawn-out sound of deep exasperation meant to show everyone how exhausting I was to deal with. "Oh, please stop being so incredibly defensive all the time, Veda. I am only trying to help you see reality. Everyone at this table sees it." She gestured wildly around the room with her silver fork. "Mom sees it. Dad sees it. The boy clearly lacks a strong, dominant male role model in his life. You baby him way too much because you feel guilty about being left all alone. You are smothering him with your grief, Veda. You are holding him back from becoming a real man." I felt the hot blood rushing rapidly to my ears, a roaring sound building in my skull that drowned out the background hum of the refrigerator. "That is enough, Callista. Do not say another word." "No, it is not enough." She snapped violently, finally dropping the mask of fake concern. The ugly, bitter truth was spilling out of her now. She desperately wanted to hurt me, and she was maliciously using my innocent child as the weapon to do it. "You cannot raise a boy all by yourself and expect him to turn out normal. Look at him. He cannot even look a successful adult in the eye." She took a deep, dramatic breath, her eyes blazing with cruel triumph. She raised her wine glass slightly, as if proposing a dark toast to my failure, and delivered the final, devastating blow. "Raising a fatherless boy on Pennies just breeds a pathetic loser." The heavy words hung in the stale air. "Loser." It echoed off the expensive wallpaper. It seeped into the ornate Persian rugs. It landed directly and heavily on my young son's narrow shoulders, crushing him instantly under its massive weight. The silence that followed was physically agonizing. No one moved a muscle. My father took a slow sip of his drink, aggressively pretending nothing had happened. My mother looked intently at her empty plate, refusing to intervene. Aunt Maura let out a soft, approving hum in the back of her throat. Cashin, the newcomer, looked utterly horrified. His eyes darted frantically between me and Callista, suddenly realizing exactly what kind of venomous snake pit he had walked into by dating into this family. I turned my head very slowly and looked at Pen. He had stopped moving entirely. He looked up at me, his eyes wide and brimming with thick, unshed tears. He did not look angry. He looked profoundly ashamed. He looked exactly like he believed her cruel words. He looked like he genuinely thought he was a broken, defective, Worthless things simply because the man who loved him more than anything else in the world had died. A physical, tearing pain ripped through the center of my chest. It was a visceral, violent ache. For 4 years, I had built a massive emotional fortress around us. I had willingly taken their insults, their pity, and their hits so he would never have to feel them. But they had found a hidden way over the walls. They were no longer just attacking my lifestyle. They were actively, purposely destroying my child's spirit right in front of my face. Something fundamental broke inside my mind at that exact second. It was not a chaotic, messy shattering. It was a precise, clean, terrifyingly quiet snap. The era of playing the victim was over. The era of the executioner was about to begin. The quiet snap inside my mind was immediately followed by a terrifying, absolute clarity. The persistent anxiety, the lingering fear of conflict, the deeply ingrained childhood desire to please these toxic people, it all vanished completely. It evaporated into the stale dining room air, instantly replaced by a cold, calculating, icy stillness. I did not yell at her. I did not burst into tears. I did not pick up my glass and throw my water in her smug face, even though my right hand twitched violently with the primitive urge to do exactly that. Instead, I reached out my hand and gently placed it over Penn's trembling, cold fingers on the table. I squeezed his hand once. A firm, silent promise that I was going to fix this. That I was going to tear down the sky to protect him. Then, I picked up my linen napkin. I folded it perfectly in half, matching the corners exactly, then folded it in quarters. I placed it gently and deliberately next to my plate. "Excuse me for just a moment," I said. My voice was dangerously calm. It did not shake or waver even a fraction of an inch. Callista scoffed loudly, rolling her eyes toward the crystal chandelier. "Are you going to run to the bathroom and cry now, Veda? Go right ahead. We will save you some tart. Try not to ruin whatever cheap makeup you have on." I did not answer her. I pushed my heavy chair back, the wood scraping loudly against the floor, and stood up straight. The floor felt remarkably solid beneath my heels. I turned my back on them and walked out of the dining room, my shoes clicking a steady, rhythmic march on the polished hardwood floor. I walked down the long, dimly lit hallway toward the front foyer, where I had left my large leatherwork tote bag resting on the entryway bench. I was not running away to hide in the bathroom. I was walking to the armory. I reached the foyer, the cool air from the front door hitting my flushed face. I unzipped the top of my leather tote. Inside, safely nestled between my silver laptop and my daily planner, was a thick brown manila folder. I had packed it in my bag on Friday afternoon. I had fully intended to take it straight to my corporate office tomorrow morning to process. It was supposed to be a routine administrative file for my desk. But the universe works in terrifying, poetic ways. And tonight, that simple brown folder was no longer just mundane paperwork. It was a fully loaded nuclear weapon. I pulled the folder out. It felt incredibly heavy in my hands, weighted with consequence and ruin. Let me take a moment to explain something critical about my real job. When you are the vice president of corporate insolvency and restructuring, you get to see the ugly, rotting truth behind the shiny, perfect facades of the elite. People exactly like Theron and Callista live entirely on credit and lies. They leverage assets they do not actually own to buy things they absolutely cannot afford, all in a desperate bid to impress people who fundamentally do not care about them. When their fragile house of cards inevitably, mathematically collapses, the regional banks call people like me. My specific department assesses the bad debt. We buy the debt at a massive discount, and then we proceed with the brutal, unfeeling mechanics of corporate liquidation. We take the cars. We take the boats. We take the houses. I knew the undeniable truth about my sister's so-called perfect, wealthy life. I had known the exact numbers for months. I knew about the repeatedly missed mortgage payments on her gated estate. I knew about the desperate, high-interest personal loans taken out to fund her fake interior design business. I knew about the lies Theron told about his phantom income. I had kept my mouth firmly shut because despite everything they did to me, they were still my family. I had even crossed strict ethical boundaries in my own heart and wallet, deciding to silently intervene. I had used my own personal money, transferring funds anonymously every single month to keep the banking wolves away from her front door. I did it solely for her twin boys. I wanted to be the bigger person. I wanted to take the high road and secretly save them from total ruin. But the high road was permanently closed now. You do not get to look my grieving son in the eye, call him a pathetic loser, and then expect me to quietly pay for the expensive roof over your arrogant head. I gripped the manila folder tightly in my right hand, my knuckles turning white. I took one deep, long breath, letting the cool foyer air fill my lungs to capacity. The lingering fear I had carried for 4 years was entirely gone. I was the one holding all the cards now. I was the judge, the jury, and the executioner, and it was finally time to let the heavy axe fall on their pathetic illusions. I turned around and walked back down the hallway. As I approached the dining room, I could hear their muffled voices echoing through the archway. "She is so ridiculously sensitive," Callista was loudly complaining to the room. "I am just telling her the hard truth. That kid is a total mess. He needs a man to straighten him out." "Well, you know exactly how she is," my mother sighed in agreement. "Always desperately playing the victim for attention. She will come back in a minute, sit down, and apologize for making a scene at our table." I stepped through the archway and walked back into the dining room. They fully expected a crying, broken widow to return. They got a corporate executioner instead. I walked straight past my empty chair at the side of the table. I did not sit down. I marched to the very head of the table, stopping directly between my mother and father, looming over them like a dark storm cloud. I looked down at Callista, locking eyes with her. "I am not playing the victim, Callista," I said softly, my voice carrying to every corner of the room. And with that, I raised the heavy manila folder and prepared to throw it onto the glass. Thank you for watching the first half of my story. The real explosion is about to happen. If you are enjoying this and want to see how I finally destroy their illusions, please leave a comment down below saying, "I'm Win." That is the secret code for everyone who has stayed with me this far. I will be hearting and replying to every single comment that says, "I'm Win." Stay tuned because you will not believe what was inside that folder. The heavy manila folder hit the polished glass surface of the dining table with a sharp, definitive smack that echoed loudly in the sudden silence of the room. I pushed it hard with the flat palm of my hand. It slid smoothly across the long expanse of the expensive glass table, gliding past the crystal water goblets, bypassing the silver gravy boat my mother polished religiously every Thursday, and came to a dead, perfect stop right in front of Callista's half-empty wine glass. "What on earth is this, Veda?" my father demanded from the head of the table. His thick eyebrows furrowed in deep, patriarchal annoyance. His voice boomed, carrying the weight of a man who was entirely used to being obeyed without question. "Are you throwing office paperwork at us now? Is this some sort of childish tantrum because you did not get the inheritance you wanted? If you are going to act like a spoiled teenager, you can leave my house right now." I did not look at him. I kept my eyes entirely locked on my older sister. Her face was twisted into a familiar sneer of pure, unfiltered disgust, looking down at the plain brown folder as if I had just slid a dead, rotting animal onto her dinner plate. She crossed her arms over her chest, leaning back in her heavy dining chair to put as much physical distance between herself and the folder as possible. "Open it," I said. My voice was a low, terrifying whisper that somehow carried over every other sound in the room, cutting through the thick, suffocating tension like a razor blade. It was a voice I reserved for hostile corporate takeovers and uncooperative debtors. It was a voice my family had never heard before. Callista let out a harsh, mocking laugh, looking around the wide table to gather her usual eager audience of supporters. "Oh, please. What is this supposed to be? Veda, did Little Pen draw another messy finger painting that you want us to pretend is a masterpiece and put on the fridge? Because I am trying to eat my expensive dessert, and I really do not have the time or the patience for your pathetic little dramatic outbursts. Take your trash off the table." I leaned forward slightly, resting both of my hands flat and steady on the cold edge of the glass table. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. True power does not need to shout. I said, "Open it, Callista. Or I will reach across this table and open it for you." And I will read every single line of those documents out loud to Cashin and Aunt Mora so they can hear exactly who you really are. I will read it slowly, and I will make sure every single guest in this house understands the intricate details of your pathetic reality. The explicit mention of our new audience member, Cashin, made my mother shift nervously in her cushioned seat. Odette lived her entire life for the approval of outsiders. Veda, please, my mother warned, her voice tight with rising panic and social anxiety. Do not cause an ugly scene in front of our guests. Just let it go. Sit down, eat your tart, and apologize to your sister. We are a respectable family. But Callista was far too proud to ever back down from a direct public challenge from the sister she considered vastly beneath her. She sighed dramatically, tossing her perfectly styled blonde hair over her shoulder in a show of profound exasperation. Fine, let us see what fascinating, miserable trash you brought to my dinner, Callista sneered. She reached out with her perfectly manicured fingers, her nails painted a pale pink, and flipped the heavy cover of the manila folder open. I watched her face with the intense, unblinking focus of an apex predator. I watched the exact, beautiful progression of her terrible realization. The first document sitting on top of the neat pile was a formal, legally binding letter. It had a bright red, undeniable stamp pressed across the top right corner. Callista looked at it dismissively at first. Her mocking sneer remained in place for exactly 2 seconds. Then her eyes scanned the bold black text printed at the very top of the heavy parchment paper. She frowned deeply. She squinted her eyes, leaning in much closer to the paper as if the words were suddenly written in a foreign, incomprehensible language. And then it happened. The moment I had waited 4 agonizing years for. The smug, arrogant, untouchable smirk vanished entirely from her face. It was wiped away as cleanly as if it had never existed in the first place. The artificial, expensive tan on her skin seemed to drain away in real time, replaced by a pale, sickly, terrifying gray pallor. Her jaw dropped open slightly, her breath catching audibly in the quiet dining room. Her hands, previously so steady and confident, began to shake violently. The heavy legal paper rattled against the glass table, making a frantic, pathetic tapping sound. "What is this?" She started, her voice wavering, cracking under the sudden, immense weight of a reality she could no longer deny or manipulate. "Where did you get this? This is illegal. You cannot have this. You stole my mail." "Read it out loud, Callista," I commanded, my voice echoing firmly off the walls. "Read it to the family. Tell them what it says right there in the bold print." She did not read it. She slammed the folder shut so hard her wine glass rattled dangerously, threatening to spill over the white tablecloth. She threw both of her hands over the brown cover, pressing down with all her body weight, trying desperately to hide it from view. "This is private," she screamed, her voice shrill, defensive, and bordering on pure hysteria. "How dare you go through my private mail? Theron, do something right now. She is insane. Throw her out of this house." "What is it?" my father asked, his deep voice rising in volume and authority. He put his silver fork down forcefully, the metal clanging against the china. "Callista, what is going on? What did your sister give you?" "Nothing," Callista yelled, genuine tears of panic welling up in her wide eyes. "It is nothing. Veda is just snooping. She is just incredibly jealous of us. She faked some documents to make me look bad because she is bitter about the will." I did not hesitate for a fraction of a second. I reached my arm across the wide table, grabbed the edge of the brown folder, and forcefully flipped it open again, exposing the bright red stamp to the harsh chandelier light for everyone to see. I pointed my index finger firmly at the center of the document. "It is a formal notice of foreclosure," I stated clearly, turning my head to look directly at my parents. "Callista and Theron have not paid a single dime toward their massive mortgage in 6 full months. The regional bank has officially started the legal proceedings to seize their precious, sprawling suburban estate. They are losing the house." The silence that immediately followed was vastly different than the silence from before. It was not the silence of awkward social tension. It was the heavy, suffocating, crushing silence of total shock. "That is simply impossible," my mother breathed out, letting out a nervous, high-pitched laugh that sounded like a piece of breaking glass. Callista lives in the gated estates. Theron is a top-tier luxury broker. They're expanding their financial portfolio. You heard them talking about it tonight. Theron lost his job 7 months ago, I said, turning my piercing, unforgiving gaze to my brother-in-law. Theron froze mid-movement. His face turned a bright, mottled, unhealthy purple. He was staring intensely at his empty dessert plate, refusing to look up and meet anyone's eyes. Cold sweat began to bead rapidly on his forehead, catching the light from the chandelier above us. He was not laid off due to a bad economy, I continued, my voice steady, rhythmic, and ruthless. He was fired and escorted out of the building by corporate security for padding his expense reports and siphoning commission fees from other hardworking brokers. Embezzlement. Corporate fraud. He is currently blacklisted from every single luxury brokerage firm on this side of the country. And worse, he is currently under active investigation by the federal authorities for defrauding his clients through unregulated cryptocurrency schemes. My father stared at Theron, his mouth hanging slightly open in disbelief. Is this true? Alaric demanded, his voice shaking with a potent mixture of disbelief and mounting rage. Theron, look at me right now. Is this true? Theron did not answer. He could not form the words. He just reached out with a violently trembling hand, grabbed his crystal wine glass, and drained the rest of the dark red liquid in one desperate, pathetic gulp. Callista was hyperventilating now. The pristine, untouchable image she had spent years cultivating was burning to ashes right in front of her eyes. She scrambled to put the fire out, resorting to the only tactic she knew, attacking the messenger. "Shut up!" Callista shrieked, slamming her fists onto the glass table. Thick black mascara tears started to stream rapidly down her pale, ruined cheeks. These were not the fake, theatrical tears she cried so easily at my husband's funeral to get attention. These were real, ugly, messy tears of profound panic and total exposure. "You do not know anything about our lives. We just had a minor cash flow issue. It is a temporary setback." "It is temporary." "It is not temporary," I replied coldly, feeling the immense power shift in the room settling firmly into my own hands. I saw the raw numbers. You are drowning in an ocean of debt, and the water is already far over your head. You maxed out your last 3 credit cards 2 months ago just trying to buy expensive gifts to keep up the fake appearance of your failing boutique business. You literally cannot even afford the gasoline to drive yourself to the airport, let alone fund a luxury lifestyle. But the 85%, my mother stammered, gripping the edge of the table, looking as if she might actually faint. She looked wildly between me and her golden child. The perfect household, the private schools, all the massive success. All debt, I clarified, letting the harsh reality sink deeply into her bones. All of it was bought with borrowed money they do not have and can never repay. They built a towering palace out of lies just to impress you and just to make me feel small. You think you are so incredibly smart, Callista spat, her face twisted in ugly rage. Just because you work a miserable little desk job and found some leaked banking papers online, you are still a nobody, Veda. You are still the poor, pathetic widow living in a rented shoebox across town. You printed these out in your sad little cubicle to scare me. Dad, she is lying. Tell her she is lying. No one spoke. My father looked utterly lost, staring at his hands. My mother was silently weeping into her napkin, mourning the death of the perfect family image she had cultivated for decades. Then, a quiet, deep, authoritative voice broke the silence. She is not lying. Every head in the room snapped toward the far end of the long dining table. Cashin, Aunt Mora's new boyfriend, slowly stood up. He reached into his tailored suit jacket, pulled out his expensive reading glasses, and slipped them onto his face. He walked calmly, with measured steps, over to where I had thrown the documents. He picked up the spreadsheet, examining the corporate logo, the watermarks, and the signature line with a trained, professional eye. Cashin, what are you doing? Mora hissed, pulling frantically at his suit sleeve, desperate to maintain the illusion. Sit down. This is none of our business. This is just a sibling rivalry. Cashin ignored his girlfriend entirely. He looked at my parents with a profoundly serious, deeply professional expression. Alaric, Odette, he said evenly, his voice carrying the weight of undisputed authority. You clearly do not know who your daughter is in the financial world. My auditing firm works directly as a third-party contractor for the banking sector. I know her specific executive division very well. He tapped the crisp paper with his index finger. Veda's title here is Vice President of Corporate Insolvency and Restructuring. And in our current market, an executive of her specific caliber pulls in a base salary of at least $400,000 a year. That does not even include substantial performance bonuses, stock options, and equity shares. The room went dead silent. The validation from an outsider, a wealthy, respected man they could not dismiss or call a liar, was the final, devastating nail in the coffin. It shattered the last remaining fragments of their collective denial. Aunt Mora's mouth clamped shut. She shrank back deep into her chair, slipping her hands under the table so no one could see her fake, gaudy bracelets. My father slumped forward, burying his face in his hands, letting out a long, ragged sigh of defeat. Callista stared at Cashin, her eyes wide with unadulterated terror, finally realizing that the solid ground she thought she was standing on had completely vanished beneath her feet. These documents are legally binding, properly filed, and undeniably real, Cashin stated, placing the papers gently back on the table. Your daughter is not a desk clerk. She holds more financial power than anyone else in this room combined. The sheer gravity of Cashin's words settled over the dining room like a thick, suffocating blanket of snow. The long-held illusions were dead. The ugly truth was violently, undeniably exposed for everyone to see. But I was not finished yet. The foreclosure notice was just the opening act. The real devastation, the killing blow, was still waiting patiently to be delivered. I looked at Callista. Her hands were gripping the edge of the glass table so tightly her knuckles were translucent. The skin stretched thin over the bone. Let us talk about your elite interior design firm, Callista, I said, keeping my tone conversational and measured, which only served to make the words more terrifying. The one you claim is securing massive corporate contracts. The truth is, your business was flagged for fraud by our vendor management system 3 months ago. You buy cheap, mass-produced furniture from overseas, slap a fake designer label on it, and upcharge your clients by 300%. You are not a designer. You're a scam artist, and the industry knows it. That is not true. She sobbed, but there was no fight left in her voice. It was a weak, pathetic whimper. It is entirely true, I said. But that is not even the most interesting part of this situation. Do you know why you have not been forcibly evicted from that sprawling gated estate yet, Callista? She stared at me, her mouth hanging slightly open in silent horror. Her expensive makeup was running down her face in dark, messy streaks. She looked like a melting wax doll left out in the blazing hot sun. Because the regional bank made a clerical mistake, she whispered, repeating the desperate, illogical lie she must have been telling herself for months to help her sleep at night. No, I corrected her sharply, cutting through the delusion. Major financial institutions do not make clerical mistakes regarding hundreds of thousands of dollars in arrears. You have not been evicted because someone has been actively intervening on your behalf. Callista blinked rapidly, her mind frantically trying to process the new information. What do you mean intervening? Here is the tragic irony of your entire situation, I said slowly, enunciating every single syllable with deadly precision. My corporate department specializes in buying bad debt from smaller regional banks. We buy it at a massive discount, and we collect the money owed or we liquidate the assets. 3 weeks ago, my bank bought a massive package of distressed residential mortgages from your specific regional bank. That foreclosure notice you are looking at right now, that exact file, landed directly on my heavy mahogany desk. I paused, letting the heavy silence build, letting the tension stretch until it was nearly unbearable for everyone in the room. I am the executive who currently holds the legal right to your home, I stated. I am the one who authorizes the local sheriff to come and change your locks. My mother let out a loud gasp, pressing a trembling hand to her chest. But if you hold the debt, Why haven't they taken the house yet? I told you someone was actively intervening, I said, bringing the focus back to the papers scattered on the table. For the last 6 months, ever since your regional bank flagged your account for immediate default, a series of anonymous minimum payments have been made directly to your mortgage account. Someone paid exactly $3,000 on the first of every single month to keep your file in the pending status, effectively keeping the banking wolves safely away from your front door. Callista looked up, a tiny, desperate glimmer of hope flickering in her ruined, tear-streaked eyes. Someone was paying it? She whispered, her voice barely audible. I reached out and tapped the second page of the spreadsheet with my fingernail. I did. My father's head snapped up. You? But why would you do that? You just sat there and let us think you were broke. I did it for the twins, I said, my voice unwavering and clear. I paid it because your twin boys, Hayes and Kale, are entirely innocent in this disaster. I did not want my young nephews to come home from their fancy private school and find a heavy steel padlock on their front door and all their toys sitting in cardboard boxes on the curb. I did it because despite how terribly you treat me on a weekly basis, I wanted to be a good aunt. I wanted to secretly protect them from your colossal, selfish failures. Callista looked down at the banking spreadsheet. She saw the long list of transfer routing numbers. She saw the name of the originating account clearly printed next to each sum. Veda. You knew, Callista breathed out, the realization crushing the breath out of her lungs. You knew this entire time. For months you sat at this table and let me brag. You let me act like I was better than you. And you knew I was completely broke. I let you dig your own grave, I corrected her, feeling no sympathy. I was waiting. I was waiting to see if you possessed a single, solitary ounce of human kindness in your heart. I was waiting for just one Sunday dinner where you treated me or my grieving son with a basic level of human respect. If you had been kind, if you had shown any humility at all, I would have kept paying it. I would have quietly helped you restructure your massive debts and save your home. I paused, looking directly at Penn. He was watching me intently, his posture straighter now, drinking in the strength and authority I was projecting. But you were not kind, I said, turning my wrath back to my sister. You were unimaginably cruel. You intentionally used my son's deep pain to make yourself feel powerful. You called him a loser because his father died. You said raising him on pennies was pathetic. I leaned forward, my face inches from hers. Well, the pathetic loser you just insulted? For the last 6 months, his mother has been using her pennies to keep a roof over your children's heads. I reached into the pocket of my blazer. I pulled out my smartphone. The bright screen illuminated my face in the dim lighting of the dining room. This is the part that is going to hurt the most, I said, tapping the screen to open my highly secure banking application. I navigated past the biometric security protocols and opened the specific commercial portal for my accounts. What are you doing? Theron asked, his voice cracking with rising panic, stepping toward me. Since you love to loudly brag about how a successful household requires 2 parents, I figured you 2 capable adults could handle your own financial obligations without my help, I said. I pressed my thumb against the screen, navigating to the payment history section of her mortgage file. I found the last 6 months of anonymous transfers. No, Theron yelled, stumbling over his own feet and taking a desperate step toward me. Veda, you cannot do that. If you reverse those specific hardship payments, the entire arrears balance hits our account immediately. We will be in total default. Immediate, unrecoverable default. I know exactly how it works, Theron, I said, my voice cold as ice. I wrote the corporate policy. I selected the 6 transactions. The screen asked for confirmation to reverse the funds due to unauthorized transfer status. I looked at Callista. Her eyes were wide, silently begging me. I pressed confirm. A quiet, pleasant chime echoed from the phone speaker. The funds were instantly reversed, clawed back from the bank's holding account, and deposited straight back into my ledger. What is the total? My father asked, his voice a hoarse whisper. How much do they owe now? I did not even need to look at the screen. I had the exact numbers memorized. $74,500, I announced clearly. Due immediately by 5 in the afternoon on Tuesday. Or the local sheriff will arrive on Wednesday morning with moving boxes. The massive number hung in the heavy air. $74,500. To my parents, who had just spent 4 years treating me like a destitute charity case, it was an impossible, staggering sum of money. To Callista and Theron, it was a definitive, inescapable death sentence for their fake, glamorous lifestyle. But the system alert on my phone was not finished. A red banner flashed across the top of my screen, indicating a cross-default clause had been triggered. I frowned, tapping the notification to expand the file. I read the legal notes attached to the original loan origination. I looked up, my eyes locking onto my father. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place, and it was more devastating than I could have ever imagined. "Dad," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Did you co-sign her loans?" My father physically recoiled as if I had struck him. He looked away, unable to meet my eyes. I looked back at the screen. No, it is worse than co-signing, I realized aloud, reading the grim reality of the corporate ledger. You executed a cross-collateralization agreement. You secretly leveraged the equity in this house, the house we are sitting in right now, to guarantee her massive business loans. My mother let out a blood-curdling shriek. "Alaric, tell me she is lying. Tell me you did not put our home on the line for her." "I did it to help her." My father yelled back, tears springing to his eyes. "She said it was just a temporary bridge loan. She said her business was booming. I believed her." I looked at the terrified faces of my parents. The realization hit them like a freight train. When I reversed those payments and pushed Callista into total default, the bank did not just come for her house. They were coming for my parents' house too. The entire family was going down. "You have to fix it," Callista pleaded, her voice breaking into harsh, ugly sobs. She reached her hand across the table, desperately trying to grab my arm. "Please, Veda, reauthorize the payments. I will pay you back. I swear to God, I will get a job. I will do anything. Do not let us lose the house. Think of the twins. You said you care about the twins." I pulled my arm back sharply, refusing to let her touch me. "I am thinking of the twins," I said sternly. "Maybe if they lose this giant, fake house, they will learn humility. Maybe if they have parents who are forced to be honest about who they are, they will not grow up to be cruel, arrogant bullies like you." "Mom, Dad," Callista shrieked, turning her tear-streaked face to our parents, begging for a savior. "Make her fix it. Order her to fix it right now. She is ruining our lives over a stupid comment." My mother looked at me. The condescending pity was entirely gone from her eyes. It was replaced by genuine, naked fear. She finally realized that she did not know the powerful, ruthless woman standing at the head of her dining table. "Veda, sweetie," my mother stammered, her hands shaking as she reached out. "This is too harsh. We are family. You have to help your sister. If you do not help her, your father and I will lose everything. Think of the embarrassment. Think of the massive scandal when the neighbors see the sheriff's cars parked in our driveway. What will our friends at the country club say?" I looked at my mother, feeling a profound, sickening wave of disgust wash over me. Even now, facing the total financial ruin of her favorite daughter, facing the loss of her own home, her primary concern was still the social optics. She was worried about the country club gossip and the whispering of women she did not even truly like. "I am not doing anything to you, Mom," I said, keeping my posture rigid and my face devoid of sympathy. "I am simply stepping out of the way and letting the natural consequences of your own terrible actions catch up to you. You enabled her. You secretly risked your own security to fund her lies. You judged people who were actually working hard. This is the bill coming due. But you are holding the power to stop it." Odette pleaded, crying openly now. "Just pay the $74,000. We will pay you back. Your father and I can dip into the retirement funds. We can sell some assets." To prove just how little their pleas mattered, I tapped my phone screen one last time. I opened my personal liquid savings account. I held the phone up, turning the bright screen toward my mother, then panning it slowly toward Callista and Theron. The bold numbers glowed brightly in the dim room. $1,250,000. "That is just my liquid cash savings," I told them, watching their eyes widen in absolute disbelief. That does not include my retirement portfolios. That does not include Penn's massive college fund or his father's life insurance, which has been sitting untouched in a secure trust for 4 years. I could write a check right now for your debts, and I would not even notice the money leaving my account. Then do it, Odette begged, dropping to her knees on the hardwood floor. No. If you have that much, just write the check. I lowered the phone and slipped it back into my pocket. No, I said. I have the money, but I am utterly out of respect for you. The finality in my voice caused Callista's legs to finally give out completely. She sank heavily to the floor right next to her overturned dining chair, her expensive designer dress pooling awkwardly around her knees. She threw her hands over her face, sobbing uncontrollably. The loud, racking sounds of her despair echoed off the expensive oil paintings in the hallway. It was a pathetic, messy, undignified display of a woman who realized she could not manipulate, lie, or bully her way out of the massive hole she had dug for herself. I looked down at her. Tell me, Callista, I said softly. Who is the pathetic charity case now? Who is the loser? Refusing to look up at me, my father finally spoke. He stood up slowly from his chair at the head of the table. He looked suddenly very old, his broad shoulders slumped, the arrogant patriarchal air completely vanished. Veda, he said, his voice heavy with defeat and exhaustion. You have made your point. You are highly successful. You are independent. We were wrong to doubt you. We were wrong to judge you. Please, just end this nightmare. Save your sister's house, save our house, and we will never speak of this terrible night again. We will treat you with respect. I looked at Alaric, the man who was supposed to protect me, the man who had allowed my child to be mocked under his own roof for years. You still do not understand, Dad, I said softly. This is not about proving my success to you. I do not care if you think I am successful. I stopped needing your approval the day I buried my husband. This is about justice. I turned my back on the weeping adults and walked slowly back down the length of the dining table. I stopped right next to Penn's chair. My brave, quiet 10-year-old boy was sitting perfectly still, his eyes darting back and forth between the crying adults and me. He looked confused, overwhelmed by the sudden chaos, but most importantly, he did not look ashamed anymore. The heavy burden of their judgment had been lifted from his shoulders. I knelt down on the hardwood floor so my face was exactly at his eye level. I ignored the chaos happening behind me. I ignored Callista's wailing and my mother's begging. I reached out and gently cupped his face in my hands. His skin was warm. Penn, I said, my voice projecting loud and clear so every single person in that room could hear my words. Look at me. He met my eyes. You are a wonderful, brilliant, incredibly kind boy, I told him, pouring all my love and fierce protection into every syllable. Your heart is bigger and stronger than anyone else's in this entire house. You are not a loser. You are not broken. You do not need anyone to fix you. Your father would be so unbelievably proud of the young man you are becoming, and I am so proud to be your mother. Penn's lower lip quivered, but this time it was not from shame. A small, genuine, beautiful smile broke through his worry. He nodded, sitting up a little straighter in the heavy oak chair. He heard me, and more importantly, he believed me. I stood back up, feeling a massive, invisible weight lift entirely off my shoulders. I looked around the ruined dining room. The expensive roast lamb was getting cold and greasy on the silver platter. The perfect illusion of the wealthy, happy family was shattered into a million unfixable pieces. I am resigning from this family, I announced to the room. I am officially firing all of you from my life. I will not be here next Sunday. I will not be here for Thanksgiving. I will not be here for Christmas. Do not call my phone. If you need financial advice, Callista, call a bankruptcy lawyer. My father's face hardened, a last desperate, pathetic attempt to regain control of a situation he had entirely lost. If you walk out that front door right now, Veda, do not ever expect us to welcome you back. You will be cut off. I smiled. It was a genuine, deeply relaxed smile. That is not a threat, Dad, I said softly. That is a reward. Come on, Penn, I said gently. We are leaving. Penn immediately hopped out of his heavy chair. He did not hesitate for a second. He did not look back at his grandparents. He did not say goodbye to his weeping aunt or his paralyzed uncle. He just walked quickly to my side and grabbed my hand, holding it tight. We walked out of the formal dining room, down the long, opulent hallway, and out the heavy oak front door. I pulled it shut firmly until I heard the heavy deadbolt click satisfyingly into place. The cool evening air hit my flushed face immediately. We walked in comfortable, beautiful silence down the long paved driveway to my reliable older Honda. As we drove down the highway toward the city, the heavy tension completely drained from my body. I felt lighter than I had in 4 years. "Hey," I said, glancing over at him. "I am starving. What do you say we stop and get a massive pizza? Extra cheese, extra pepperoni, and a huge order of cheesy garlic bread." Pen's eyes lit up with pure, unadulterated joy. "And a large soda? Even though it is a Sunday night?" "And a large soda," I confirmed with a loud laugh. We drove through the night heading toward our small, warm, incredibly safe apartment. I realized then that true wealth is not measured in sprawling estates, trust funds, or luxury cars. True wealth is driving away from a toxic situation, knowing you have the power to protect the people you love, and knowing your soul is entirely your own. I drove away knowing I held the power of their ruin, yet chose my son's peace instead. I left them to face the financial collapse they built with their own bare hands, including the loss of my parents' home. Thank you for watching the story to the very end. If you enjoyed it and found it satisfying, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. See you in the next family drama story.